Alright, boys and girls, here is how you get started. You're going to do a create new. You're going to make sure that this is inches, 18 by 24. You can either do like this or like this. Probably more like that would be typical for this type of project, but hey, your choice. Now if you want to do it in Photoshop, I'm not going to stop you. Vector graphics are awesome for posters, but since Photoshop could also handle an 18 by 24 document, so whatever you prefer, it doesn't really matter. It'd be way easier to do the typography stuff in Illustrator. So only use Photoshop if you plan on doing like really complex, I don't know, hand-drawn stuff. And you need those pixels rather than vector art. So once you get started, you know, obviously we talked a little bit about, you want to have this character window open for sure. Window, type, character. We've talked a little bit about how you can use text size, tracking, letting, kerning and tracking to create your typography. I would recommend, if you're centering it, make your text box as big as the entire frame and then click center, and that way you know that it's going to be perfectly centered. Hello. And if you select it all, you can do a Control A to select it all. Then you can come in and adjust your text size. I would also recommend possibly doing it in multiple text boxes rather than all in one. So if your quote was, "Hello world, how are you doing?" You could do this, "Hello world, how are you doing?" You could do it like all in one text box and try adjusting the sizes and adjusting your leading and stuff, but it might be better, you might be better off just kind of having multiple text boxes. So in other words, take this "how are you doing," Control exit to cut it, let's make this thing smaller, and then Control V to paste it, and I'll make that 2 lines. There we go. Now, you might encounter a situation where this occurs. Oops. Your text box isn't big enough, and you'll see this little red plus, and that's telling you, hey, your text box is not big enough. So in that case, just do this. But you can also click on this button right here, if you double click on it, and it changes your text box to something like this, where you can now, I forget what it's called, but you can now adjust the size of the font and move it around. Whereas if you double click on it again, it's blue, then it's going to just do this. It's going to change the size of your text box. Again, to make sure it's perfectly centered, go edge to edge. And then if you want to shrink it after that, hold down Alt and watch what happens. It'll shrink it from both sides, and you know it's still perfectly centered. That's just smart typography work right there. So here we go, both edges. Cool. Remember that kerning is going to be important, so you want to look at your words and you want to make sure that the spacing looks good. It looks great in hello. Looks pretty good in world. I could maybe just pull this one back a little bit. Let's see. How are you? This is a very well kerned font. I mean, obviously Arial is, or Myriad is one of the most popular ones, so it's going to do a good job at that. But you know, you can just go through and just make some fine-tuning, minor stuff. When I grade it, I'm going to be looking at your words and seeing how they're spaced, and if it does not look evenly spaced, I'm going to know that you didn't kern. That's going to affect your grade. Also, you know, your tracking is important, so the distance between spaces, I'm going to ask why, if it's different, why is it different? Otherwise, it should pretty much look consistent. As far as fonts, you know that you can choose different font styles here. Sometimes it's a good idea, if you're only going to stick to 1 or 2 fonts, to like emphasize some words. You could have hello world, change this to a condensed, how are, it could be italicized, you doing, let's bold that, let's keep this one condensed. So even though I only have 1 font here, the different styles really give it a lot of variety and make it interesting and cool and clean. And again, if you double click here, you can do this. make the whole thing bigger. Remember, your text has to be at least 50% of your overall composition. But you don't generally want to stretch your text like that. I don't recommend that at all. If you're going to resize it, always do it by the corner and hold down Shift to keep the proportions. You can download fonts. I'm going to recommend a site called fontspace.com. And this is where you can find all sorts of fonts. If you find one that you like, you're going to need to download it. So let's say you like vegan style, and you click download, and you open this up. Call me over when you double click on the TrueType font. It's going to ask for a password, and then I can just install it for you. Make sure you know the name of it. This is called vegan style. It'll tell you right here under font name, and then in Illustrator I could now go in and say I want to choose vegan style. So if I type in vegan, there it is. I think the new versions you don't have to restart Illustrator, it just pops right up. And I'll just change the size. Hello world, how are you doing? Okay, after you feel like you've got a pretty good composition, you like your typography, I would start playing with color. A lot of students say, hey Mr. Shelley, how do I change the background color? Well, remember, you just create a cube, or sorry, not cube, this is two-dimensional, a rectangle, and fill it in with whatever color you like, and just send it to the back. You're better off slightly going over your border rather than having any white underneath it. There's no problem. You can make your text, your square as big as possible. It'll cut off on that black line, so don't worry about it. And there you go. So hopefully that'll help you get started. Oh, and one last thing. If you want to make some changes to your text, if you go to Type, Create Outlines. You can't do it if your text is selected. You have to select the whole text box. Type, Create Outlines. This is going to allow you to turn your text into shapes. And if I just lock my background real quick, that allows me to come in and say, oh, you know what, I want this section right here to be a little longer. You can just drag a box around a particular section of your text, and you can make changes to it. So I can make my little dot right there much smaller. That's with the direct selection tool, by the way, to select the individual sections. So there you go. Hopefully that helps and shows you how you can kind of get started. And good luck. Like and subscribe.